In the past few videos, we've been talking about how to add, subtract, and multiply polynomials together. In this video, we're going to kind of start talking about how do you solve an equation that has a polynomial in it. So for example, if I were to give you this equation, x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0, okay? Now, obviously, that's a trinomial, right, on the left-hand side, right? Three terms, three pieces, trinomial, okay? But it's a little more complicated than you think as far as trying to solve these. There's a bunch of ways to solve these. One of the more simpler ways is that if we can take this trinomial and essentially break it down into what's called its factored form. Okay, so real briefly, what I mean by factored form, okay, factored just means that it's broken down into groups. Okay, so broken down into groups. Okay, and I'll be spending some time in later videos of how you actually break that number down. This idea of factoring is going to be a big topic this semester, but we're not there yet. Okay, so the idea is if you take that trinomial and you break it down into its groups, it ends up being this x plus 2 times x minus 3. Okay, and essentially I took this trinomial and I broke into its groups. And again, I'll show you how to do that in later videos. I kind of wanted to skip that for now. Okay. Essentially, now it's into two binomials, which if you were to multiply these back together, you would get back up to your original trinomial at the top. Okay, so it's broken down into these two groups. Okay. Once it looks like this, it's fairly easy. Okay. We use this concept called zero product property. So let's go and write that down. Zero product property. Okay, and essentially what that means, I'm going to write out kind of the formal definition off to the side over here. If two or more numbers okay, so if two or more numbers multiply to 0, then that means that one of those numbers has to be 0, right? Because that's the only way you can multiply to 0 is if one of them has to be 0. Okay, so if two or more numbers multiply to 0, then at least one of them is 0. Okay, and if you think about it, it kind of makes logical sense, right? A lot of times we'll say that multiplying by 0 is the easiest because it makes things disappear, right? Anything times 0 is 0. Here's another way to kind of think about it. If I'm just taking two random numbers, so A times B, okay? And if I know that A times B, if I know the answer to that is 0, the only way that can happen is if either A is 0 or B is 0. That's the only way that can happen, right? That's the only way that two numbers can multiply to 0 is one of them has to be a 0. So either A equals 0 or B equals 0. Okay? We're going to take that concept and apply it to our question. Okay? So let's go and do the example we kind of started above. So again, I'll go over in later videos how to actually factor it into its groups. But let's say they already give it to you in this format. X plus 2, x minus 3 equals 0. Okay? And essentially, think of this as two numbers, right? We have this number and we have this number. That's why getting into those groups is so important. You get two groups, which is kind of like the same thing as two numbers. Okay, so if two groups are being multiplied together and the answer is 0, then either the red group is 0 or the blue group is 0. So what we do is we account for both. Okay, let me scroll down a little bit more. So once we're in our groups like this, what we can do now is we can separate it into two possibilities. Okay, so either x plus 2 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us two answers, which is what we expect. Okay, kind of another idea which we'll get into later is when you're in the original question, we talked about degree, right? This is a degree 2 equation. So what that means is we should expect 2 answers. Okay, that's kind of a general rule of thumb. If it's a degree 3, we should expect 3 answers. But we'll get into more details later. Okay, so we're going to get 2 answers here. Once we've separated this out into its 2 groups, it's actually very, very easy. Right? These two equations separately, everyone should be able to do, no problem. Right? So to get rid of that 2, you would subtract it to the other side. So we get one answer of x equals -2. That's one answer. Then our second answer, we get rid of that -3 by adding it to the other side. Again, I'm still showing my work, right? Like you should do on quizzes and tests. And our other answer is 3, okay? So the answer to this polynomial equation is x equals -2 and x equals 3. Both of those answers would work, okay? That's essentially what we're doing is once we have these into our factored form, we just make separate equations because either one of them would work, okay? Last little kind of vocabulary term is sometimes they refer to these answers as roots, okay? Roots are basically just saying it's the solution to your polynomial. Okay, so the roots to that last example we did the roots are -2 and 3. Okay, and that'll come in handy as we get into more advanced math as well, the idea of what a root actually means. But right now, it's essentially saying your answers are your roots. Okay, all right, I want you guys to try one of them on your own and apply the same concept, right? And again, I'm going to give it to you in its factored form right now. We'll get into how to actually get there later on. Let's say we have 2x minus 3 times 9x plus 9 equals 0. And again, the fact that it equals 0 is very, very important. If it doesn't equal 0, then we can't do this, this idea of zero product property. Okay? All right, this question's a little more challenging than the previous one, but it's the same idea. Split it up and then solve your 2 equations. Okay? All right, go ahead and pause the video at this point and go ahead and try that out. All right, let's go ahead and check your work. So again, it's already set up for us. We don't need to do anything special. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this group and set it equal to 0. So 2x minus 3 equals 0. And we're going to take this group and set that one equal to 0. 9x plus 9 equals 0. And then we solve these 2 equations separately. It's a little more challenging than the previous example we did, but it's still something that everyone should be comfortable with. All right, so to get rid of, on the purple one, we're going to add 3 both sides. If you still need to, you can draw that line just so you can see left side and right side. Okay, so we get 2x on the left equals 3. And then we're going to get rid of that 2 by dividing. Now, 3 does not divide by 2 nicely, so we're just going to keep it as a fraction, 3 over 2. So that's one answer. Second answer, same process. Let's get rid of that 9. It's positive, so we'll subtract it. If you're confident in your lining up, you don't have to draw that line down the equal sign. That's just there to kind of help with organization. And let's get rid of that 9 by dividing both sides. And then -9 divided by 9 does work out nicely to be -1. Okay, so our 2 answers, or our 2 roots to this polynomial is 3 over 2 and -1.